Hi, I'm Chris Cravens, and I just want to say thank you for joining me on this Intro to Enameling journey. I've been enameling for about 4 years now, and it is my passion, and I hope that it becomes yours as well. I want to start this off by saying I don't consider myself a fine art instructor. I look at myself more as a guide. Enameling and enamels in and of themselves are an art medium. And so, to me, the best way to learn about an art medium is finding different instructors, learning bits and pieces from them. We all have different ways that we like to apply with and use and fire our enamels. Some techniques are going to work well for you, some maybe not so much. So I just wanted to start this out by saying I'm a guide. This series that we're going to be going through has 3 parts, 4 if you include this overview and intro video. We are going to be diving in and looking at 3 enameling techniques, which I'll get into in a minute. But before we do, I want to ask you a question that may be simple, maybe not. And it is, why do you want to get into enameling? For many, it's just that they want to add a little color to their jewelry. For some, they want to use enamels to express art and create things like sculptures and wall art and other useful things around the home. So as you progress, if you're someone who is starting out with I just want to add a little bit of color to my jewelry, that's completely fine. If you're like me, once you begin using it, you'll begin to understand the power and beauty that enamel has. So in the next 3 videos, what we're going to do is build some skills. So the first one, which I call your first project, is going to get into a method called dry sifting. With enamel, like I said earlier, there are so many ways to apply and use it. We're keeping it super simple. So sifting, we're using the medium dry, we're sifting it onto a piece of metal, firing it, and seeing some beautiful results. This is where many people are completely happy to just stay with their enameling, and that is 2 thumbs up. I love it, it's great. Taking it a step further into our second video, our second technique video, I call it Wet and Wild. So this one is going to be using a technique called wet packing, where we actually take the enamel, add some water to it or a bonding agent, and use it to place enamel grains to create designs. This is a foundation for moving into other enameling techniques like cloisonné and champlové. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay, I'm going to tell you later. But it is a foundation. So all of these are foundations. The third technique video is called Scribe It. And what we're doing in that video is a technique called sgraffito, where we're using a sharp tool to basically carve out designs in the enamel before it's fired. So this will open it'll open your abilities wide open. You can do many different things with sgraffito, a combination of wet packing and dry sifting. So between these 3 methods and working through this with me, I think you're going to have a lot of fun, and you'll leave with a good skill set to decide if enameling's for you, and not have invested tons of money. So the way that the videos are going to work, I'm going to get into using a kiln a little bit, but we're going to primarily focus on torch firing, simply because it's a less expensive way to try out the products if you don't have access to a class in your area. Now I'm going to take a few minutes to walk you through the tools that you're going to need for the 3 projects that we're doing, as well as the supplies. You'll also see a link below that goes to my website where you can download the list for your reference. Then we are going to, after I walk through the tools, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the challenges with enameling, just so you have an understanding before we dive. For the projects in these Intro to Enameling videos, we're going to be using Thompson's 80 mesh medium temperature, medium expansion enamels. What this means is at the factory,
sheets of glass are embedded with minerals and pigments to produce the colors you see, and then they're crushed to produce fine grains of enamel, which are then passed through industrial sized screens that have 80 squares per inch. So that means 80 mesh means that grain sizes bigger than 80 holes per screen will not be in a jar of 80 mesh enamel. So if you look at this, it looks like finely like powdered sugar or something very light, which brings me to an important safety note. When you're working with enamels, especially dry enamels, a P100 particulate mask is highly recommended. This will protect your lungs. This is silica, and once it gets in your lungs, it remains. For the projects in the videos, we're going to be using 3 colors. A transparent nitric blue. Transparent means when you fire this layer of enamel on, you'll be able to see layers below it. An opaque nut brown. Opaque basically means you can't see through it. And then we'll also be using 1030 white. I have a couple of different sizes of enamels here. This is a 2 ounce, and this is an 8 ounce. I'm going to put some recommendations together for you to get 1 ounce sizes of enamel, which will give you enough to practice with and then some without breaking the bank. One thing I like to do with the enamels I'm working with is use little, these are just little 1 ounce solo cups with lids. You can get them at restaurant supply companies or Gordon Food Service. And just put a small amount in here to work from. This way, if you get dust or other colors that cross-contaminate your enamel, you don't ruin an entire $15 jar. So it's a nice way to just protect your investment. So we've used 3 pretty basic colors for our sample pieces in the 3 technique videos. This was dry sifting, wet packing, and sgraffito. I chose a nice white that serves well as a base color underneath transparency. Blue is always a good, especially if you sell jewelry, blue is a good option. Thompson has some very pretty blues. So that's why I picked this. It's nice and it's kind of a cool blue. And then the nut brown I just think is a nice neutral. But if you want to get adventurous and try some other colors, I highly recommend it. What you'll need are 2 opaques and 1 transparent. So I've pulled a couple of colors together for you so you can get some different ideas of what to do. So this sample right here, I actually have 4 colors on here. I have the white. Actually, this is a different white. This is foundation white. And as you can see, it kind of interacts and behaves a little differently with the colors when you sift it together than the 1030 white. So I would still recommend the 1030 white getting started. So this is actually 1010 white. Go with 1030. The other colors that I have are seafoam. This is an opaque. I've got mandarin orange and herald purple. Mandarin orange and herald purple are 2 transparents. I would say that mandarin would be the bonus color. So if you only were going to get 3, I would get the white, the seafoam, and the herald purple. And in this, in this sample, and then the other samples I'm going to show you, I fired basically a half moon of white, and then I left a half moon of plain copper and cleaned it up so you can kind of see what the transparency will do with the plain copper below. Okay, so that's color and one color option. This is another one. This one's a lot of fun. What I've used here, same deal. I've got a half moon of white and then the plain copper underneath. This is butter yellow, mandarin orange, ta-da, and then a blue-green called peppermint. And peppermint and you can really see it a lot better here, the mandarin orange, are a lot of fun on plain copper. These were fired in the kiln, so they're a little more brilliant than the blue here that I did with the torch. This blue actually fires through really nicely on the copper too in the kiln. I just couldn't quite get it hot enough with the setup that I have for the torch. So this is another fun color combination. I would say if you were going to go with this, I would get the white, the yellow, and the orange with this peppermint as a bonus. And then another fun color combination for fall. I did the same thing here where I have the half moon of white and then the copper is here. And I added opaque bitter green, which is one of my favorite greens, by the way. It's like so witchy, like Halloweenish. This is transparent chestnut brown, and this again is transparent mandarin orange. So for these, the mandarin orange would be your bonus color if you wanted to get 4 colors. So white, bitter green, and chestnut would be a fun color combination. And here is an example of that first one. This first one without the orange, doing the process that we did earlier where we have a layer of white and then I did sea foam. So there's white, there's a half moon of sea foam, and then I did Herald purple on top. And I really like how the Herald purple kind of blends with this blue. Looks kind of neat. So anyway, just gives you an idea of some of the possibilities. And I can't wait to see what you do if you do something entirely different. Something else that you may want to invest in is a product called Clearfire. This is a large bottle. You can get small bottles of this. Clearfire is essentially an adhesive that will allow you to coat a piece of metal or a layer of enamel so that other layers of enamel will stick to it. Sometimes we'll use this full strength. Most often we'll mix it in a half and half ratio with distilled water and use it to slightly spray the surface of the metal. You don't have to get a sprayer like this. You can use just a pump sprayer or something simple you can brush this on. I like the Preval sprayer simply because it gives just a gorgeous fine mist on the metal that adheres well and it dries quickly. We will be using this a little bit for the sgraffito process, but you can try it with water and see how you like it before you buy this product. Now I want to move on to cleanup products. As you're working with enamels, there are various stages of the process of firing and cleaning and firing additional coats. When you fire the enamel onto a piece of metal, you're going to end up with black edges, especially if you're using copper or sterling silver, of the metal oxides rising to the surface where the enamel is not present. To clean this up, there are several ways to do it. I'm just going to focus on the simplest and easiest method, and that is the alundum stone. So the alundum stone, this one's looks like it's been through World War III. They actually get way worse than this. You'll basically use this to grind off glass and fire scale from the sides of your piece. And it just works really well for that. When you're applying multiple layers of enamel, there's a tool called a glass brush that can be useful. This isn't an absolute necessary item. They are expensive, but they're basically tiny fibers of glass that you will use to scrub the enamel layer after it's been fired to remove bubbles. This helps make the additional layers that go on top nice and clean and clear. In the videos, I'm not going to use this over much. I will show you how, but I want you to see the difference between with using it and not using it. The next thing that you'll need is some type of pickle or cleaner. Since we're going to be working with copper, if you don't have pickle handy, Penny Bright is a great solution. You basically just use the sponge that's included in the product. Looks like a gel. Wipe that on and then scrub it off with a green 3M Scotch-Brite pad. That works really well to clean the metal. Pickle also works, but you need to be aware that it can interact with some of the enamel colors and change them around the edges of your piece. So Penny Bright is a nice safe option. Otherwise, just keep an eye on your enamel when it's in the pickle. The first application method that we're going to be using is something called dry sifting. We'll use some tools called sifters from Thompson. Kind of remind me of sand sieves from when we were kids. This is a small, medium, and large, and these are 40 mesh sifters. So basically what that means is any particle larger than 40 squares per inch will not fit through these. So everything that is in an 80 mesh jar of enamel should fit through just fine. To give you an idea of size, if you're trying to decide, like, let's say you don't want to buy a bunch of sifters, you just want to do one because you're trying it, the small is a perfect size for a 1-inch piece of copper. This is what I'm going to be using for the videos. Something else you'll need for dry sifting is something called a spatula. So a spatula you'll basically use to reach inside the jar of enamel and place it into the little sifter. I also like to use just quarter sheets of scrap paper, you know, things you print out, just cut them into quarters. These are nice, nice to work from. You can set your sifter down in your enamel and do your work, and then if you haven't cross-contaminated colors, you can just pour it right back into your jar, or if you having a spare jar handy just for mixed grains to use for counter enamel, which we'll talk about more, comes in handy. Just dump it in there and you're done. Something else I like to use when I'm working with enamels is just a palette knife to basically lift shapes off my fingers and set them onto trivets and things like that. For the second application technique we're going to be doing, which is called wet packing, you're going to need a couple more tools, spoons or a palette to add enamels to, so you'll use your spatula and put them in there. We're going to add some water to these to moisten them so that we can then place them using tiny pointy tools, otherwise known as a scriber, which is the straight, or a spreader, which is the bend. We'll be lifting wet grains of enamel out and placing them on our copper pieces. So if you don't have access to these, you can use toothpicks or dental tools, things like that. These are just available from Thompson and what I like to use. The majority of the videos that I'm going to share with you are going to use torch firing, just because it's a little more accessible to most people. But I will be spending a little bit of time just talking about the kiln and the pros and cons to each method. First, before we jump in, I want to share with you some tools that you're going to need for torch firing, and then we will hop over to the kiln. So this is called a trivet. It is a piece of stainless steel that's been shaped so that you can set metal in it as you're firing. So for example, this copper piece would sit right inside after the enamel has been applied and it's ready to be fired. Trivets come in different shapes and sizes. On the Thompson enamel site, this is their small trivet. It works great for the projects we're going to be doing. This is a 1-inch piece of copper. Other kinds of trivets that are available are longer trivets. So this one will hold many pieces. This is a small, so you can set several pieces in here. This is not recommended for torch firing. You'd use something like this in the kiln. The main reason is this bottom part is you can't get the flame up under there really well to hit the bottom of the enamel to fire it. So just wanted to show you a couple of different types of trivets for torch firing. You'll just need, I would just get one of these to start if you're going to do the projects in the videos. Other pieces of equipment that will come in handy for you. This is a spatula, so I just use a palette knife for this. There are little spatulas that you can buy, but palette knives work great. So in a nutshell, when you have a hot piece of enamel on the trivet, you can slide this in, pick up the enamel, and set it onto a fireproof surface. Works great and gets the piece out of your way. Some other tools that you'll need if you're going to be moving hot trivets and hot pieces around. I like to use just some bent nose pliers to pick them up. This is from the hardware store. This brand is Irwin, so this would be Lowe's. These work fantastic for grabbing hot stuff. Some of the other tools that you'll need for torch firing are a heavy-duty screen and tripod. So this apparatus lifts the screen up way above the surface so you can fit the torch underneath to fire your piece. And you can even set the screen on so you can see a good example of what that would look like. You can use different torches for enameling. I would recommend getting a more powerful torch, especially if you're going to be working with larger pieces. So this little blazer torch, as an example, would have a hard time even firing a 1-inch piece of copper. The main reason is you want to bring up the temperature of the whole piece of metal relatively quickly for the enamel to flow properly and not overfire. So I would stay away from something like this unless you're doing tiny, like 1/2-inch pieces. I have had success with more powerful creme brulee torches. This is a Max Flame. It works well for the 1-inch piece. So if you're just starting out and you don't have a torch like an air acetylene torch, this is a good place to start. The Smith Little torch, you're going to run into the same limitations that you do with these smaller blazer torches. You'll be able to do smaller pieces. Larger pieces are going to be a challenge. So I just want to put that out there. What I'm going to be using is a Smith acetylene air torch. I want to talk a little bit about kilns for enameling. This is a Paragon SC2 kiln. The main thing that you want to be looking for in a kiln, if you've inherited one or you're trying to buy a used one, is something that has a front opening door. This kiln is turned off. This is a really nice size for smaller pieces. It can hold, let's see, I would say reasonably maybe a 4x4 square of enamel. I'm a jeweler, so this is perfect for my needs. With a kiln, there are a couple things that you'll need to be looking for. This is a tool called a pyrometer, and it basically tells you how hot the kiln is inside. You can also add electronic controllers that will allow you to ramp up and ramp down the heat inside the kiln. I just use the manual method, which is open the door to cool it down, close it to heat it up. That's pretty old school, but I like it. I end up watching the colors of the trivets and things like that to tell me what's going on with the enamel. And I'll talk more about that when we're torch firing. One additional tool that you'll need, well actually two, when you're working with the kiln, so you'll be using the trivet. This is called a firing screen. It's just a simple, I'd say it's a mid-weight mesh, stainless steel, and then I like the ones that have the bends on the edge so you can fit a firing fork underneath. This is a firing fork. Looks like we're getting ready to do some joust, or we're going to joust the French fry magnet back there. It's got a little heat protector, and you basically would use this to slide underneath the firing screen, get it centered. I'm doing this with my left hand and I'm right-handed. Place it in the kiln, remove it from the kiln, and so on. So two pieces of tools that are critical. If you're nervous, you can also buy like welder's gloves or fireproof gloves. I don't use them. I'm pretty happy with this.
Now that we've walked through the tools, I just want to talk about a couple other things with enameling that can be challenges and something to consider as you're going through. We're going to get into a discussion about something called the coefficient of expansion in our first project. It is something that as an enamel artist you will be learning to love and hate at the same time through your journey. Basically, it is that metal and glass expand and contract at different rates when they're heated and cooled. And so there are some things we can do to help alleviate the cracking that results from this. The other thing that I want to talk about is the metal oxides that result when you're firing anything with copper, which we are using as beginners simply because it's less expensive to work with. Sterling silver, you'll also deal with metal oxides because sterling is a combination of fine silver and copper. And then fine silver, you won't run into the oxide problem, but fine silver can be a little tricky to work with because it's a softer metal. So what happens as you're firing is the oxides in copper will rise to the surface. If you've ever heard of or seen flame painting where you get beautiful colors on the surface of copper, or you've watched a penny turn brown over time, firing copper speeds that process up. And so that dark color will rise underneath the enamel, the first layer of enamel that you're firing. So there are some things we can do to work around that. We can use the opaque enamels and completely cover up the metal so you don't see it at all. Or with the transparent enamels, we'll fire them a little longer so that those oxides will burn out more. But because of this, because of the oxides, enamels will actually fire as in different hues and colors on different kinds of metals. So if you want to understand a little bit more about what this looks like after we go through the videos, I would recommend using Thompson Enamel puts a color chart out, and it basically shows what enamel looks like over silver, over flux, which is clear enamel. I know it's confusing if you're a metalsmith and you think flux is what you use for solder. This is different. This is flux. It's a clear layer of enamel. This chart also shows what color would look like over white and on silver, on fine silver, and on copper. So it gives you an idea of the different variations you can see. The oxides will also fight or argue with certain minerals and colors like reds and oranges, sometimes yellows. So again, using the chart from Thompson Enamel can be very helpful with that. With that being said, we're ready to jump into our first project, and I can't wait to share it with you. Thank you again. Bye-bye.